Okay, so this is basically covering, as Michael said, the Bermuda Queen Victoria. And so we start with the first issues. So Bermuda, the first stamps were the penny, sixpence, and shilling. And these all came out in 1865. There was no essay produced for the twopence. And then there was another essay produced for the threepence. Quick side note, is this a full screen for you guys or not?
It should be full screen. You're good.
No, are you seeing a full screen?
Yes.
Okay. So then, so there are a couple of die proofs. So these are die proof essays, an essay being that this was a interim design before the final design was accepted. And on the shilling, you'll see that there were some little additions on the side. So then we have the penny, twopence, sixpence essay, and the final full shilling. Why the final full shilling doesn't have a number and the one that was before it had a number 2, I do not know. And then finally, we came up with the threepence, which was released in 1873. So there are quite a few plate proofs. One of the big questions is the penny imperf a plate proof, or is it a true imperfect stamp that came to Bermuda and that was used in Bermuda? The thought for the latter is the fact that you have the cancellation, and so if it's just a plate proof, how did these get to Bermuda? Most of them are used. There are 2 mint copies known. In my personal feeling, I don't see why all the other stamps would have a plate proof and not the penny. So I do think it's actually a plate proof. And then, this is sent to Bermuda as samples, and then they did get used in St. George's. De La Rue are known for doing different essays. Different types of specimens. So the most common specimen we have is the D11, and D5. On these other ones, the manuscript, the 2 and the 8 are very rare, normally 1 or 2 known only. The cancelled hand stamp on the penny and the threepence, they're relatively common. So there's a full sheet of each of those known. A full sheet would have been known, and then divided up. I'm actually trying to reconstruct some of the sheets of that from the large blocks that you can also find, and they are fairly inexpensive. So those were, we think, produced for the 1877, or so a lot later. There's a Kensington exhibition, and De La Rue was showing off its stamps that it could do. So going to the first issue specimens, the printed samples are all on De La Rue archive pages that have been cut up with its little cross. They originally came from Luddington. Other than these D5s, so the D5s are the ones that are fairly common, but you can then find 2 of them in this blue color, both on the sixpenny and the shilling. Other than this threepence cancelled, there are no other perforated threepenny stamps with a specimen overprint that I'm aware of. And if anyone else knows differently, I would love to know and have a copy of them. And then these D8s in the manuscript, again, most of these are exceptionally rare. One of the big questions for a long time has been how the perforations were done. So De La Rue did not have its own perforating machines. So they would send all their stamps to be perforated by Somerset House. The Somerset House perforations have that gutter margin in the middle on the left and the right. And when De La Rue got a machine, they had a perforation on either side of the gutter, so you just see the full-size stamp. And so an easy way of telling it is if you have a strip of 6 of the stamps and they are crown CC, then it has to be a De La Rue perforated stamp. So Morris Luddington in his book said that the last 3 printings were perforated by De La Rue. Now, the penny and the tuppence for the 1877 and 1878 printings were both done at the same time. So why would De La Rue perforate one and not the other? In my mind, the only one that is perforated by De La Rue is the final printing, so the 1880. And that makes sense. So in 1880, they also had that compound stamp on the threepence, sixpenny, and shilling, where they did the compound perf 12 and or 12 and a half and 14. So in my mind, that's actually quite a scarce stamp, and it's a brighter color, so you can actually tell some difference between them. The other way of telling is the perforation on the Somerset House between the vertical and the horizontal perfs are quite close together, and on the De La Rue, the perforation is wider apart. So that's one of the few ways of trying to tell, otherwise they look almost identical. So one of my things I've always been into is the printings. So the penny, there is quite a lot of variance between them. I don't have enough data to really do the printings other than to say that the first printing is on thin paper, and then the final printing is a De La Rue, which is a brighter stamp if you're looking at it, and with having that wider perforation. The tuppence has 6 printings, and again, I'm not 100% certain on them. All I know is the 1874 printing has to be correct, because that was presumably used for the overprinting of the 1 penny. For the threepence, Gibbons used to always say that you had the yellow buff as the first printing, followed by the orange. And then one day I've got a couple covers and I had these stamps, one of which is dated there, 1873, which is orange, and I got a cert for that. And Philip Kins spoke to Richard Watkins and said, hey, maybe this is wrong. Maybe that orange should be first. So with my stamps, the stated copy, and with a cover from 1873, all of which are the orange, that was helping to prove the orange. The second threepenny is really scarce. I mean, the first threepenny is scarce because there were only about 9,000 stamps. Second one is about 20,000 stamps, and that really has quite a lot deeper color. And I think both this and I think this threepence, sixpence, and shilling all deserve an extra printing to be added to the Stanley Gibbons catalogue. But if you ever find a threepence on a pale stamp, which is overprinted, it has to be wrong. And actually same with the penny. So the penny, when we get to the light green, if you have a 1 penny overprint on a light green stamp, that stamp was not released until in the end of 1875, so that could not be accurate either. And then the sixpenny, you have the purple color, which is, to me, has a little bit of black in it, a mauve, which is a lot deeper, and then finally the very pale mauve. Something I love plate numbers. So that you start off with a 1 penny, and then you had control numbers. So De La Rue is meant to have done this. So when they were producing the stamps, they had an order that they made the stamps in. So this is a 29th stamp produced by De La Rue, 30th stamp, 31st stamp, twopenny, and these continue through into the CA watermarks. And then with the threepenny being 8 years later, they're up to number 57. used stamps. I mean, we find tons of used stamps, and used stamps are generally a lot cheaper, a lot more available than the mint. But trying to find blocks of any size is a lot more difficult. So these are the largest known blocks for used blocks on 3 different values. And the shilling, there are 3 or 4 used blocks known, but the rest are, these are the largest 3 blocks. There is no other block higher than a pair of the tuppence, of the threepence and the sixpence. For the tuppenny, there are a couple blocks. One is known on piece and one is known on a cover, but there's no separate block of 4 that I can find. Now, for the imperf stamp, so one of the big questions is this gets faked a lot. So this is the genuine imperf that was shown earlier. Here's one with number 14. Now, the way you can't prove that it's right is because the margins on the top and the bottom are wrong. Because Somerset House had that wing margin, you can often have a wider margin on the left or the right. So having a wide margin on the side isn't sufficient to say whether it's a genuine stamp. The other giveaway is the fact that this has a number 14 cancel. So the used imperfs are only known with the number 2 cancel. So here is a later stamp dated 1879. So again, this is getting past the period where it would have been used, and this time it has the wing margin on the right. But again, the margins on the top and bottom aren't sufficient. This is a stamp I found on eBay. So it had a American certificate saying that it was a forgery. It had FAUX on the back, so French faux for fake. And I looked at these margins on the top and bottom and I said, it's too good. It cost me $25. So here is a perforated sample. You can't see perforations too well. And the perforations on the bottom. So with the bottom margin, if this top margin was right, you would have, this is a fake stamp, you would have to have perforations inside. So I argued and sent away for a cert and got a good cert for that stamp. As I said, as Michael said, I love my King George VI stamps. I also love my King George V stamps. I am a man who looks at the plating and positioning of stamps using the family floors. I find that a fascinating area. And on the used penny stamps, they are relatively common and inexpensive. So this can actually be a lot of fun for collectors. Out of the sheet of 240 stamps, so you had the four panes of 60. So on the Crown CC, you got 21 stamps with floors. On the first and second printings of the Crown CA watermark, you got 64, and then 70 as the plates get worn a little bit more for the last printings of the Crown CA watermark. And so that's 25 to 30% of the stamps. And so that makes it's actually harder to find than you think. A lot of the floors are very common. And some of these, I believe, do deserve catalog status, especially the Q for Leo. So that's one that you will see in auction catalogs or dealers, and they charge a premium for it. But it's something I love. So this is just a sample of the different varieties. There's a small break, but the 1 and the O.1, the P is a lot of damage, and there was repaired later on. So that that's a lot reduced in the later stamps, but on the first CC watermarks, then that's very uncommon. Now, again, this is easy enough to see the break, the dash, and the one I quite like is the sort of dash and the Y. So earliest recorded covers, there was an earlier recorded penny cover that got lost in the mail being sent from UK to a collector in the States. So currently this is the earliest one known. The 1873 threepence, again, that's an orange, and then the shilling is the earliest known stamp cover from Bermuda. So the stamps were reportedly released at the post office on the 25th of September, and this is the 28th of September. So I've got to look at a couple covers. So registered 1867, manuscript registered. Then they came in with the two different types of a large register, and then finally we had this from 1879 on, the register are in the oval. So then we get to the threepence on penny. And so this was an essay. There are 3 blocks of 4 and 1 block of 6, and then a couple of covers for those. Covers are exceptionally hard to find. Now again, fake or not. So you see these on eBay all the time. And the vast majority of them are like this final stamp where the centering is completely wrong. So these 3, the centering looks great. And I actually had hope. So the first 2 are genuine. They reckon that they'd been put into someone's desk, and then a few used copies were actually used after the correct period. And since this one also had a number 1, I was happy, although with this, it looks like it's above the stamp anyway. The secret I got told was with the watermark, and I'm not sure how well you can see this, but on this middle stamp, the C is coming down into the bottom perforations. So any other watermark that has a CC from the watermark above the perforation line, it can't be right. Because this was done from 1 penny and 60 cents, so they should all have the same placement of the watermark. And these other 2, I said, this one, the perforation is just wrong. This one doesn't look right. And again, the watermark on that is too high. So then they ran out of the penny. So we had to overprint some stamps with 1 penny. These are the largest known multiples of the 3 values. The tuppence is the only multiple and largest known multiple of all of these values. And the nice thing about the tuppence block is we have a couple of stamps with the round O. So the round O is something else that one can collect. So that one has a break. So we're now showing some of the errors that you find on these stamps. So you have the error with no stop on the penny. It also exists on the shilling. It does not exist on the tuppence. So when the tuppence was done, it was done at a different time. So we can actually allocate which of the dates that the printing was done that produced that error. These 3 stamps, these 2 stamps have no stop. They have an 1879 postmark. If you look at the Y doesn't curve round. So on these other ones, the Y, has a little curve at the bottom. So the Y ends up straight. The O, this is really round circular O. So even the round O that we saw back here, it's not the same type of O. I have seen an example. I was trying to find in the Bermuda Post. So a fellow collector had shown one of these in the Bermuda Post for which they'd gotten a US cert being genuine. And I hate to say that it's not. This threepence, again, the O is wrong. The perforation on this is the compound perf. So 12.5 by 14. And this penny is, again, as I was saying earlier, it's too pale. So it's on the second printing of the shilling, so again, cannot be correct. Couple covers. So this one actually was meant to blow in. So this is just a front X Tucker. It's the only copy with the tuppence on it, standalone on cover. The green color, what a pity. It almost looks like the blue of the tuppence for the shilling. Anyway, so this one has the paid number 12 cancel. For all the other cancels that I've seen for the H2, the 1 is missing. So this is the only copy that I have for the H12 with the 1 and the 2. And then finally, we have a front of the penny on threepence and the Moncrief cover. So years ago, I showed my Queen Victoria in London, and the main judge came up to me and said, "Oh, you don't have that cover." So for now, I do have it. It's in my hands for safekeeping for current time. So the only known cover with multiple values on it, making up the 7-penny rate to London. I mentioned the compound perf. These stamps are still very common. The threepence a little bit harder to find. However, for the shilling, they have 2 perforation errors. The perforation imperf on the right, the top pane was basically all in strips. Some of them were in strips of 12, and then there are a couple of blocks with the blocks of 6. The bottom pane has, I think, been completely divided, so you only find the single stamps with this perforation on the right. And then you have a perforation between these vertical stamps, so the 3 rows. Again, I was showing this in Arapex one day, and afterwards I go to the critique, and the judge says, "Oh, David, with everything else you have, I'm surprised I didn't see your strip with the shilling with the imperf between." And that was one of the things I learned as an exhibitor. So this was at the very bottom row on the left of one of the frames. So for the judges in poor light, it was very hard to see that I actually had this stamp. So I've now rearranged some of my exhibits through judicious ordering so that important stamps are no longer on the very bottom. They made new values. I mean, again, these stamps aren't that uncommon, but so at least these show the essays and the unaccepted essays for the new values. Watermark crown CA. So you have the appendix sheet and you have a set of stamps. You can tell that these stamps are the essays because they're perforated 12. So there are 2 appendix sheets which have complete sets. It's believed for all these color trials that you would have had 6 stamps produced. So there's 2 appendix sheets, and now there are 2 sets known. And this set, we can actually find that a couple of the stamps had come from Tucker. One of the stamps had come from Ulrich. So these have been found again and reunited over time. Just showing the shades, dull rose, rose, carmine, and then this last one. If you look at the back, the color of the ink really comes to the paper, so it's an aniline carmine. They brought out the 2.5 penny stamp. There are 2 essays, one on card, which is shown here. There's also one on tracing paper. And the whole idea of the plate proofs is you produce the stamps, you produce the die, you stamp the die before it gets hardened onto a piece of card to make sure that it's coming out to see how it looks like. You then make a plate, and then, you then harden that, you stamp them into the plate, you check it again to see that it's still okay, then you produce the full plate of stamps, and often you then do an after striking to do your finalization. This plate here has a little tiny break, so it's hard to see it. And anyone who wants any copies of any of this can always, send me an email. So presumably it failed. So even though we have this, presumably this was before hardening and then after hardening, they then had to make a new die. So a day later, they did a new die with before hardening and after hardening. So this is a set of all the examples of the two. 1 farthing, again, they produced some essays. And then you had the plate proofs. One of my regrets is I do not have the final accepted plate proof in the gray color. Oops, sorry. So we don't have the final plate proof in the gray color. That was in Dennis Misson's collection. I did have a chance to buy a few things before it went up for auction, but I didn't. And then the price of it went for something that was beyond what I was willing to pay at that time. The common error is the stamp on the far right with the damaged G. Again, that's nice, relatively available to find mint used and on cover. You have an inserted F, although this is not a great example. So some examples do show up better. And the reason for that is the F had got damaged. So the stamp on the left is not listed, but is a damaged copy. And then the pair on the bottom, it's got no gum on the back. It's got this mucky thing on the front. So I believe that this is printed on the gum side. One of these days I will send it off to try and get a certificate for that. And that's the only known example that I am aware of. And then recently I purchased this cover. So group of stamps being sent to UK, and blown up of the stamp on the upper left. Again, it's showing that, quite a lot of damage to the F. And that was it. So thank you very much all for listening. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them.